So let's talk about safety. Um, Talking about safety for you as a healthcare worker, but also the safety of the people that you are taking care of, whether it's your residents or your patients, in whatever environment that you are working in. So body mechanics is a term you may have heard before. This is going to be really important because we're going to be learning a lot of skills where we're moving people around, moving human beings around. And that is a real easy way to get yourself hurt if you're not doing it correctly. CNAs, nursing assistants, actually have more injuries than any other career, any other job in the U.S. So if you think about that, we have construction workers, people who are moving heavy equipment, but the CNA still has more injuries. So it's really important that you guys do this and do it correctly. Save your back. I always tell my students that you're going to need to work for a long time, so be careful. So some basic things to know about body mechanics is to always have a wide base of support. So spread your feet apart. Don't put your legs together, put your feet together when you're moving somebody. Make sure that you're bending at the knees and using the strong muscles of your legs and not straining your back. That's one of the most common injuries that we see is lower back injuries, and that can cause a lifetime of pain and disability. Always hold things or people close to your body. Don't be afraid to get up close and personal. And then you want to coordinate movements. So that's telling somebody, okay, on the count of 3, we're going to move together so that you're not working against them or them working against you. Equipment safety is important. Now that you're going to be working, you need to have your eyes wide open all the time. Don't have your head up in the clouds, daydreaming half the day away. You need to look at what's around you and make sure that everything is functioning. So if you hear sizzling, if you smell smoke, if you see sparks, you need to be aware of those things and not use that equipment. And if you do see any of those things, make sure that you report that. Don't just brush it off to have somebody else behind you come and then use that equipment and then hurt themselves. Always follow manufacturer instructions. If you don't know how to use something, don't use it, right? Because we're dealing with people here and we don't want them to get injured. Any facility that you work in is going to have somebody that inspects equipment and puts stickers on it, so you should check that sticker and make sure that it's within date. Most of the time it needs to be checked every year to make sure that it's functioning properly. And if a family member brings in something for their loved one to use, like a hair dryer or an electric blanket or something like that, it has to be checked first before it can be used. So you need to make sure that you find that out. So the facilities that we are going to be working in have all kinds of hazardous materials in them. It could be cleaning supplies or medications that we use. So we need to be careful with those things too. We need to make sure that we're careful that we're not exposed to it. As a nurse, some of the medications that we give we can't touch with our hands. So we have to use gloves. Cleaning products, wherever there's any kind of material that could be harmful, there will be material safety data sheets. So you should know in the facility that you're working in where those are in case you are exposed to something. Like if you were to get some cleaning product in your eye or in your mouth or on your skin, those material safety data sheets will let you know what needs to be done. And in some facilities, these things are locked up. Especially places like in long-term care on a lockdown unit, maybe where there's a lot of dementia, and people aren't aware of what these products are, they might accidentally drink something that they shouldn't. So those things are going to be locked up. So it could be cleaning supplies, or it could even be stuff like lotion and mouthwash. Because when somebody has dementia, they can't tell if that's lotion or if that's a drink. So we don't leave those things out for them to be exposed to. Lead poisoning is not very common anymore, but it's still something to be aware of, especially if you're in an older building. If a family member brings in plants, you need to check and make sure that that is something that can be in their room. Some plants are poisonous, And, we have residents that, if they're confused, they might try to eat some of those plants and it could poison them. So some facilities don't allow plants in at all. And they can also carry bugs on them. So be careful with that. Don't assume that that's okay. ETOH stands for alcohol. So typically you won't see alcohol in a facility unless it's locked up. I have seen some residents who have their own private refrigerators and they might have a bottle of wine in there because, it's not a prison and that's their own personal supply, but most of the time you won't see that out. Carbon monoxide is a gas that has no smell, but it can be very deadly. So most of the places you go, there'll be carbon monoxide detectors. But if you notice anybody's getting very sleepy or you're getting very sleepy, that might be something that you want to check on, because carbon monoxide poisoning just makes the person basically fall asleep and then they eventually will die if they're not taken out of that environment. So fire. So if there is a fire in your facility, you can't just make a run for it and leave everybody behind. It's not save yourself time. You are responsible for the people that you're taking care of. So it should go without saying that these facilities are no smoking facilities. They oftentimes have a lot of oxygen in them. In an acute care facility like a hospital, oxygen is in the wall. So you definitely can't be smoking in that situation. Oxygen is combustible, so it can cause an explosion, especially if it's a tank or something like that. So if somebody's wearing oxygen, they definitely shouldn't be smoking. I've actually had patients that accidentally killed themselves that way. We can't have any other kinds of source of flame like fires, fireplaces, candles, definitely a no. And that's why it's so important to have electronic stuff checked, like heating blankets and things like that. Anywhere you go, there's going to be fire drills that happen regularly so that everyone's aware of what needs to happen. If there is a fire or a fire drill, make sure that you are not using an elevator. You always have to use the stairs. And know these acronyms. RACE stands for if there is a fire. Let's say you go in your resident's room, there's a fire in the trash can. RACE means you first rescue the resident. So take them out of that environment, take them out and down the hall. Then you sound the alarm, pull the fire alarm. Then you contain the fire if possible. So if it's in a room, shut that door and then shut the other doors around it. And then if possible, extinguish the fire. If not, you need to evacuate. And you always want to evacuate those that are closest to the source first. Okay, so evacuate the end of the hall and then move your way up the hall. Pass is to use a fire extinguisher. So you need to pull the cap out and aim at the base of the fire, squeeze, and then start sweeping along the base of the fire. So accidents happen, unfortunately. Some accidents are our fault. They're usually unintentional. Sometimes things happen that were intentional, like abuse. Either way, we have to report these things, accidents or incidents. So an accident is always an incident, but an incident may not have been an accident, if that makes sense. So whatever you notice, you need to report. Even if sometimes if it was a near miss. So as a nurse, if I'm almost accidentally give a medication that sounds really similar to another medication, I shouldn't just be like, whew, thank goodness I noticed that. I should report that because the next person might actually make that mistake, right? And this is the honor system now where you have to have some integrity if you do make a mistake to report yourself. Because, at the heart of all of this, we need to make sure that we're taking care of people. Incident reports are going to be at every facility. They might look different, but they're generally the same thing. They're collected, and then there's an investigation done to see what happened and what can we do to prevent this from happening again. That's always our goal, is to prevent accidents from happening. So the people that we take care of are at high risk for accidents and injuries. They're vulnerable, whether it's because of their age. Very elderly people are vulnerable and very young people are vulnerable. It might be medications that they're taking. So if somebody's on opiates, they're less aware of their surroundings. Or even if somebody's on a laxative or a fluid pill that makes them have to pee constantly, they're trying to hurry up and get to the bathroom. That's often when falls happen. If somebody has paralysis anywhere, they have less sensation, so they're going to be at risk for skin breakdown. They're going to be at risk for burns. If they have poor mobility, they're at risk for fall. Any kind of sensory impairment is going to put them at risk for poisonings, for burns. And then if they have limited awareness, if you take somebody with dementia, for example, and put them in a new room, they don't know where they are, they're confused, they may injure themselves. So it's important to be aware of all of those factors. These accidents are preventable, so you need to do everything in your power to make sure that those don't happen. Non-skid footwear is a really easy way to prevent slips. You'll notice in a lot of the videos that we put non-skid footwear on people. That needs to become a habit. Make sure that beds and wheelchairs are always locked. Check the water temperature with your hand, and their hand. So you're checking it before you fill up that basin. And then when you take it into the room, they check it with their hand. Also checking that foods and fluids are not too hot. If you're feeding someone and you see a bunch of steam coming off that fork, you shouldn't probably give it to them. You should check that temperature first. You need to make sure that you're using bed rails correctly. Bed rails are not meant to keep people safe in bed, right? They're mostly for repositioning, because that person can become entrapped in those bed rails. They can suffocate in those bed rails. And there's actually a picture in your book of entrapment, and it's pretty graphic. So that's not something that you want to walk in on. Like I said before, usually chemicals and things like that are locked up so that people can't access them real easily. And then everything should be marked clearly. Okay, we shouldn't have any bottles of some mystery fluid hanging around anywhere. So this is everyone's responsibility. You shouldn't think that it's, materials job or the maintenance person or housekeeping. If you walk by and you notice something is not the way it should be, if you notice a big spill on the floor, don't just keep walking. It's your responsibility to clean that up and make sure that you're safe and everyone around you is safe.